Hi there, you are much welcome to this video tutorial, and today we are going to be talking about the rules or principles of Roman numerals. The rules or principles of Roman numerals. The first rule or principle of the Roman numerals is that the letters I, X, and C can only be repeated thrice in a succession. Additionally, L, V, D cannot be repeated. If so, then the number will be considered invalid. What is the second rule or principle? The second rule or principle says if a digit lower in value is written to the right of a digit with a higher value, the lower value digit is added. Don't worry, we are going to look at this in details in a few minutes from now. The third rule or principle is that if a lower value is written to the left of a higher value digit, then the lower value digit is subtracted. Rule number four says only I, X, and C can be used as subtractive numerals. Only I, X, and C can be used as subtractive numerals. And rule number 5 says if we have to write the Roman numbers beyond 10, we should write the number 10 or groups of 10 and then the numbers 1 or 5 as the case may be. Having looked at the 5 main rules which we follow when working or dealing with the Roman numerals, let's look at these rules in details with particular examples. By the time we're going to be done looking at all these rules with particular examples, it means we would have learned quite a number of things regarding Roman numerals. So let's go to rule number 1. Let's go to our rule number 1. Rule number 1 says, I'll read it again. We've already gone through the rules, but I'll read it again so that now we can begin to attach particular examples to each of these. The letters I, X, and C can only be repeated thrice in a succession. Additionally, L, V, and D cannot be repeated. If so, then the number will be considered invalid. What do we really mean? If we talk about these things? Alright, so now we know that they've told us, let me be numbering in that particular way as we talk about rule number 1 or principle number 1 in details. So our first point, we know that they've told us I, X, and C. And we know that I is 1, X is 10, and C is 100. They've said that the letters I, X, and C can only be repeated thrice in a succession. They are only repeated thrice in a succession. What this means is these 3 symbols which we've talked about, they can only be used 3 times within a single number. You don't go beyond that. You can use them 3 times or less than 3, but you cannot write them 4 times concurrently or in a single succession. There is nothing like I. You can only write them in a succession 3 times. Let's look at a few examples. For instance, if we talk about I in that particular way, we are referring to 1. If we talk about I, what it means is 1 plus 1, which is equal to 2. If we talk about I, we are referring to 1 plus 1 plus 1, which is equal to 3. So you can only end there in terms of repeating the i's. You cannot go beyond 3. That number is going to be considered invalid. In the same way, we can say, you can say x. We know x is 10. If you say x, it means 10 plus 10, which represents 20. If you say x, it means 10 plus 10 plus 10, which represents a 30. And that's why you can end. You cannot go beyond. You cannot put 4 x's in a single, in a single row or in a single succession in that particular way. Same applies to C. We know C is 100. You can, if you add 2 C's in that way, it means 100 plus 100, which will represent a 200. If you say C, it means 100 plus 100 plus 100, which is equal to 300 in that particular way. So that's what we mean when we say that they can only be repeated thrice in a succession. You can't go beyond that. You cannot go beyond that. So no digit is repeated in a succession more than 3 times. The moment you see any Roman number which has a particular Roman symbol repeated more than 3 times, the next thing that you should remember is that that Roman number is invalid. That Roman number is invalid. Let's go to our next point. Our next point says, additionally, L, V, and D cannot be repeated. If so, then the number will be considered invalid. So, L, V, D cannot be repeated. Firstly, we know that L is 50. We know that our V there is 5. We know that our D is equal to 500. Our D there is equal to 500. So these cannot be repeated. It means that you cannot have a situation or a Roman number which is going to give you LL. Such a thing does not exist. You will not have a number which will say VV or that way. Such a number in Roman numerals does not exist. You will not have a Roman number which is DD. Such a number does not exist. The moment you see something like this, that number is invalid. That's what we mean. If so, according to our rule there, then the number will be considered invalid. That's it about rule number 1. Let's go to rule number 2. Okay, so rule number 2 or principle number 2 says, if a digit lower in value is written to the right of a digit with a higher value, then the lower value digit is added. I'll read that again. If a digit lower in value is written to the right of a digit with a higher value, then the lower value digit is added. So remember, we are considering the lower digit being written to the right of the higher value. A lower digit being written to the right of a higher value. Let's look at a few examples so that we are able to calculate and do that correctly. So let's say examples so that we follow together. Let's take, for instance, you have the value vi. You have the value vi. Maybe another example would look at, let's say, vii. We can say xi. We can still say maybe another one xv. Then you can say xvi. We can also put lxv as examples. I think those will be enough examples for us to understand what this rule particularly is trying to teach us. All right, so now it says if a digit lower in value is written to the right, so this I is on the right of V. The letter I is on the right of V. So V is the digit higher in value. V stands for 5. V represents 5 and I represents 1. And we see that I has been put on the right of the letter V. So I, which is smaller in value, if it is on the right, what it means is, you know V is 5, it means you are going to add the value of the smaller digit I, which will give us the answer being 6. So this means that this Roman numeral here represents 6. How are we able to come up with the 6? Because the value which the digit lower in value was put on the right of the digit which is higher in value. So the moment you see such a situation, it means you are going to add the value of the higher digit plus the value of the smaller digit for you to get the actual numeric value of the given Roman number. Okay, let's go to example number 2. Example number 2 is not much different. It's pretty much similar to the one we are from doing. So you have VII. How do you get the value of this? So we know that V is 5, and then you have I, which represents 1, and another I, which represents 1. You have a digit higher in value first, and then on its right, you see a digit which is smaller in value. In this particular case, we have 2 digits which are smaller in value coming up after a higher value. So what this means is you're going to say 5. Because it's the smaller digits are on the right, you are going to add. The moment smaller digits are on the right, you add. So you have 5 plus 1 plus 1. And if you say 5 plus 1, 6 plus 1, 7. And the numeric value of that number is 7. Example number 3, xi. The higher value or the larger value has come first. Then on the right, you have a digit with a smaller value. So it's the same concept. You say 10 plus 1, which should be able to give us 11 as the numeric value of that Roman number. We go to the next example. The next example gives us xv. xv. X is 10. V is 5. So you have the higher value coming first, and then on the right of the digit with the higher value, we see a digit with a smaller value, which is a 5. So because the smaller value is on the right, it makes us add. So when you say 10 plus 5, it gives us a 15. Okay. The next example, you have 10 plus 5 plus I, which is 1. Oh, pardon me. 1. 10 plus 5, 15 plus 1, it gives us 16. And our last example, under principle or rule number 2 is LXV. So L is 50, X is 10, V is 5. We are seeing the higher value digit comes first, or symbol, the higher value symbol is coming first there, and on its right we see two other symbols which are smaller in value following, so which means we're going to add them to the value of the higher digit. So the higher digit is 50 plus 10 for X plus 5 for V. 50 plus 10, 60, plus 5, 65. So that's what that rule means. So every time a digit which is lower in value, when it is written to the right of the digit with a higher value, you should remember that it calls for you to add the value or the values of the digits lower in value to the one with the higher value. It calls for an addition. Let's go to rule number 3, or rather principle number 3. Principle number 3 says, if a lower value is written to the left, remember in rule number 2 we said if the lower value is written to the right, but in this particular case it has turned around now. If a lower value is written to the left of a higher value digit, then the lower value digit is subtracted. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at a few examples so that we fully understand what that really means. All right, examples to consider. Example number 1, we can say IV. Number 2, we can say IX. Number 3, we can say XL. Number 4, we can look at XIX. And number 5, we can look at XLV. So I think those 5 examples will be able to help us drive home the point. Okay. Now, if you look at example number 1, let's take a look at example number 1. When you critically look at example number 1, one thing that we are able to notice is that the lower value symbol, or rather digit, is on the left of the higher value digit. So I is 1 and V is a 5, and we see that the lower value symbol is on the left. So the moment you see that the lower value digit is on the left of the higher value digit, it means subtract the value of the lower digit from the value of the higher digit. So what this one literally means is we're subtracting 5 minus 1, which gives us what? 4. So since the lower value digit was on the left, we are subtracting this value of I from the value of 5, which is V here. So this is what we've just shown here, 5 being a V, take away 1, which gives us the value of IV, the Roman number, IV, its numeric value coming to 4. Example number 2, you have IX. So the lower value digit is on the left. So also there we know that X is 10, I is 1. So we subtract, and our answer there is 9. Our answer there is 9. We go to number 3. Number 3, again, we are able to see we have been given XL. So this lower value is on the left of the higher value digit. So we know that we are supposed to subtract the value of this digit, which is lower, from the higher value digit. So the higher value digit is 50, L is for 50, take away or subtract 10. So 50 take away 10, it gives us a 60. Let's go to example number 4. Example number 4 says it is XIX. So the Roman numeral XIX. Now we have a high value digit there, then a lower value digit, and then you have a higher value digit again. So what that one means is you're going to write your 10. This X, the first X represents a 10, and then we're going to say plus. So IX, these two are going to be considered to be together in that particular way. So this one, IX, is literally the same as the one we are solving in our example number 2 there. So we are going to open the brackets and show 10 take away 1. Why are we doing 10 take away 1? Because the lower value digit came to the left of the higher value digit. So we need to work out these two separately in the brackets in that way, which is going to give us 10 plus 9. Having that, then we can say 10 plus 9, it should be able to give us the value of this Roman number as 19 in that particular way. All right, we're good to go. I hope you are following. We go to our fifth and last example in principle number 3. We are looking at XLV. XLV. So we have a lower value digit or symbol on the left of the high value symbol, and then on the right also we have a higher value symbol. So what are we going to do to that one? So we know that first things first, we are going to have the high value symbol there, take away the value of the lower value symbol in that way. 5 take away 10 is these two now. That's what these two means. It subtract. Because of X being on the left of L, is literally telling us to subtract 10 from 50. So once we've subtracted, like we've shown it here, then we're going to add the V, which was on the right, of the higher value symbol. So we are going to say add 5. The V is 5. So we're going to add the 5. So this is going to bring us to 50 take away 10 is 40 plus 5, which should be able to give us 45 as our answer. 45 as our answer. All right, so I think we are good to go on principle number 3. Let's go to the fourth principle. The fourth rule or fourth principle says only values, or rather symbols, I, X, and C must be used as subtractive numerals. Only the values I, X, and C can be used as subtractive numerals. So this is straightforward. I believe we don't have much to explain about it. So literally it's telling us that only the value I, the value X, and C can be subtracted from any other value. These are the only ones that can be subtracted. You can only use these three as subtractive numerals. And lastly, our fifth principle. Our fifth principle says, if we have to write the Roman numbers beyond 10, we should write the number 10 or groups of 10 and then numbers I or 5 as the case may be. Let's get a little bit of grip or understanding to that particular statement. Let's look at a few examples. Now, we are told that if you have to write the Roman number or the Roman numeral beyond 10, we know that X represents 10 in Roman numerals. So if you have to write any number beyond this value being 10, or beyond any groups of 10, it will mean us being able to combine that single 10 forming groups of 10, which are going to give us one solid particular value. We can be able to do that. However, after we do that, the only numbers which we can be able to add to this should be I, which is 1, or V, which is 5, for us to come up with the particular values that we need. For instance, let's say we want to write 12. How can we come up with 12? So 12, there we see that there is a 10. In 12, there is a 10. So what should follow this 10 is probably a 1 plus another 1, which in Roman numeral we can show it as X being followed by I and another I. I hope we are getting that. Another example. Let's look at 20. 20 is another Roman number beyond 10. What does this mean? We know that the Roman numbers, we don't have a 20 or just like that, one single letter which will represent a 20, which means that we are going to use the basic Roman symbols to come up with the value of 20. So which symbols do we combine? So we know that X represents 10. Or maybe, yes, X represents 10. So which means that for us to have a 20, we need to add another 10 to give us a 20. So we are literally looking at 10 plus another 10 to give us a 20. So once you add 10 plus 10 to give us a 20, this is which is going to take us back to this. Therefore, for us to write this 20 as a Roman numeral or as a Roman number, we need X for this 10 and another X for that 10, and we're going to have it in that particular way. Let's look at another example. 26. How do you write 26 in Roman numerals? At the same time, obeying the rule that if we are considering or going to have groups of 10 in a particular number, what should follow should be an I or a V to come up with that number which you are looking for. So you have 26. This 26, we know that if we are to consider the Roman numbers, I, the basic ones, we have I, V, X, L, C, D, M. 1, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, 1000. 1000 in that way. So what are we going to need for us to come up with 26? Firstly, you can't get 50, L, C, D, or M because all these are beyond the value we are considering. So we're going to use a few groups of 10. So we're going to carry 110. We're going to do this. We're going to carry 110 plus another 10. And then we're going to add a 5. And then we're going to add a 1. That will be the Roman numeral to represent 26. This is 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 1. And that's what helps us to have that one. So we have two groups of 10, 10, 10. Then what follows? VI. Another example. We can look at maybe 37. So our 37, if we are to write this 37 in Roman numeral, I'm sure I would go for, again, we can't go for L, C, D, M because these are already beyond that. So we're going to use groups of 10. So we have 1, 2, 3, which is 10 plus 10 plus 10. Remember, we cannot write another x to this because it will break rule number 1, which we are taught that you can only write or repeat particular symbols thrice. How do we come up with the 7? So we know V represents 5, so we can have a V there. And then I represents 1, so we can say 1 plus another 1. So 37 is XXX V I. So you have groups of 10s, and then you have followed by a V, followed by I, and another I. So this that we've written is the same thing as 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 1 plus 1 to give us the value which we desired, which is a 37. Simple, huh? Okay, let's consider another one. Let's consider something different now. Let's say we have numbers which are greater. Numbers greater than 40. Let's say we are now dealing with numbers which are greater than 40. Numbers greater than 40, for instance, let's say 41. You have 41. Let's say A41. B, you have been given 56. C, you have been given 92. Or D, you have been given 785. 785. How do you work out these numbers? How do you work out these numbers? These are numbers which are at least greater than 40 this time. Now, if we follow the rule we are from looking at, we cannot use, in this particular case, groups of 10. Because if we use groups of 10, we are going to have x, 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 which means we're going to require another x. And if we add another x, it's going to be wrong because it is going to be defying rule number 1. So how do we write numbers which are now greater than 40? Maybe let me say 40 and above. 40 and above. How do you do that? So 40 and above, you need to use the subtractive method. Starting with the lower value digit in front, or on the left of the higher value digit. So we know that L stands for 50. L stands for 50 and X stands for 10. So how do we come up with 41? You can literally say X, L, then you add a 1. What does this mean if we use the numbers? This means 50 take away 10 plus 1. So 50 take away 10 is 40 plus 1, which will give us 41. Good to go. You've come up with a 41. So we are literally depending on rule number 3 and rule number 2. So rule number 3, the value smaller, the digit smaller in value being to the left of the higher value digit or symbol is subtracted. So we subtracted. And the smaller value or the lower value digit being to the right of a higher value digit, you add. We've added a 1. So we've come up with a 41. Let's go to 56. What do we do on 56? So 56, we know that L is a 50. So L. What next? What next? We don't have a 6, which is just a single symbol in Roman numerals. So how do we come up with a 6? We know that V is 5. So you say V. And then you add a 1, which is I. So LVI. LVI. So that represents 56. That represents 56. So what does this one really mean? It means 50 plus 5 plus 1, which is equal to 56. So this is that in Roman numerals. This is literally that in Roman numerals. Let's look at C, our C. Our C there says writing 92. How do we make 92 in Roman numerals? We have 92 there. So 92 in Roman numerals, in this particular case, we don't have a single value digit in Roman numerals for 92. So to come with 92, we are going to use a lower value digit right in front of a high value digit. Then we're going to add 1, 2. What does this mean? So XC is, we know C is 100. C is 100. So what it means is 100 take away 10. Then plus 1 plus 1. That's the II. 100 take away 10 is 90 plus 1 plus 1, which is a 2. And we have 92 as our final answer. So this is the same as this. What about 785? 785. How do you write it in Roman numeral? So how we write it? Okay, so there it is. Let's take a look at what we have here also. Now we have C there being 100, D being a 500, and M being a 1000. So what letters, what Roman symbols can we use to come up with 785? So there we are going to use firstly D, 500. So remember we said that I, X, C can be repeated. So D cannot be repeated. So we get D. Then we add C, 100, plus another 100. That is now 700. C can be repeated at least up to 3 times. So we have a 700 there. Now let's look at the 85. How do we add 85? So 700, if we look at this again, we don't have 85 on our basic symbols there. So we make 85 also. How do we make 85? Let's get L. So that's plus 50. So like now we have 750. So 50 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus a 5. That's 785 in Roman numerals. So the D there, like I said, let me use a different colored pen. The D there is a 500 plus this C is 100 plus another 100 plus L for 50 plus X, then another X, then another X, then plus V, which is a 5. If you add this together, you find that it gives you 785. So this and that is literally the same thing.